Hey, welcome back for another Dreamweaver tutorial. Today we're going to learn how to set up our page, our first page using HTML and CSS code. Some of you are coming into this with a lot of HTML experience. Some of you might be coming in with no HTML experience. So if you do have a good background knowledge of it, you're probably going to get a lot of review in this one. But if you have no experience, then it may also seem a little overwhelming at first. But just kind of plug through and go through this and pick up everything that you can. And everything that we go through today, when we start learning about the full features of Dreamweaver, we'll be re-emphasizing throughout the rest of this course. So don't freak out. Everybody started somewhere, and I'll always be here to answer any questions that you have or anything like that. And we'll kind of get through this together. So we will go into our Dreamweaver projects folder that we created last time. And the last time in class we made this getting started folder. But this time we're going to make a new folder. And this one, we are just going to call it CIC Series. I love college football. The Commander-in-Chief series between Army, Navy, and Air Force. I always think it's fun football games to follow. And I'm going to make a web page based on that. I've also given you access to images that you can use for this, or you can use your own. These pictures that I got were from Unsplash and Pixabay, unsplash.com and pixabay.com. Free images to use, high resolution, that you can use for your projects, and you don't have to give credit to the people who photographed them if you don't want to. You can use them for commercial purposes, so I try to use that as much as possible when I'm creating images for my web projects. So what we did here is inside the CIC series folder, we put an images folder in there, so you can just right click and create it. And then in here I have 3 pictures that essentially I'm just using as placeholders for this. Okay, now into Dreamweaver. This is the same process we did last time, so this will be a bit of a review also. So it's good practice. We'll go up to Site, and we need to go to New Site because we're creating an entirely new project. And then here we'll go to our folder, and we'll click on it, and we want to select our CIC series folder, and then we'll click Select Folder. Then it asks us what the site name is. I'm going to go CIC series website. That'll work great. Okay, once that's done, we'll click Save. And then you'll notice it automatically changes this up here where our local files are. But this time we have an images folder that's in there. Okay, we're ready to create our page. We'll go to File and New. Make sure it's New Document. Make sure that it is HTML. And make sure that the title, this is what we want to show up in the little tab of our document. So we'll call this one CIC Series. And then we'll click Create. Okay, I'm going to save this right away just so I have that file saved properly and I don't forget. So we'll go up here to File and Save As. And then we want to call this index.html. Now some of you might be thinking, wait, that's what we called our web page in our last assignment. Every time we create a new home page, that home page is always going to be called index.html because it's always going to be in its own folder. If there's one web page for any website, that one web page is going to be called index.html. And then if you add other pages to your site, then maybe your other one's going to be called like about.html or contact.html or schedule.html, those things. But anytime we're making our first web page and it's going to be the home page, this is absolutely always got to be called index.html. Otherwise it won't load in your sites properly. That looks good. We'll click Save. And I'm here on split code, obviously, but since we're primarily going to be using the code area for this, well, for just about everything on this first project, I'm just going to make this window a little bit bigger here. So I'll kind of explain these elements that we're putting in here as we're doing this code. And again, like I said, if you're new to this, you may be a little overwhelmed, but everything we're doing here, there's an easier way to do it later, but I think it's kind of important to see how it works in the code area before we get to the rest. This thing right here, for those of you who've taken just regular HTML from me and we used a text editor for it, we used to have to type all this in manually, and here it is all in there for us automatically, which is pretty awesome. We'll go here to the body. Like everything up here in the head is for the browser to see, and everything here in the body is like what we're coding for us to see. So that's kind of a key thing to know. And then the first brackets that we are going to put in here, I'm going to zoom in here to make this text bigger so you can actually kind of see what's going on. And I just did that with Control Plus if you're new to this. And I'm going to use header for my opening tag, and I use these angle brackets, less than sign, header, greater than sign, and then it automatically closes it to the side for me. This is called a semantic tag, and this is where it's just used to hold information. All right, and we usually call the header at the top of the page just like we would in a Word document. And then I'm going to put in some angle brackets again. And this one is going to be an H1, and this is our heading. So in here I'm going to type in something like CIC series. Alright, and I'm going to save that, and if I go up here to my modes, I will switch to live. And when I type in live, then I can kind of see this update as I'm typing it in a little bit better. So that's our first heading in there, your very first text that you entered into a web page. The next thing that we'll do is we will press enter. And so you'll notice each time that we create something, there's usually an opening for it, and then there's a closing for it. The opening has the name of the tag, and the closing has a slash in front of it. The next one we're going to put in is one that people usually use for a nav menu. So we'll type in nav. And here we have our navigation menu in here. And basically what we'll do for this is we'll just type in some filler text for it right now. We'll worry about hyperlinks at another time. But the way that we'll type this in is we'll say like link 1, link 2, link 3, and link 4. Again, these don't link to anything right now, but you can see where that would be in our web page. Next one that we have, and you could use a number of tags for this one, but a popular one could be main. And this is just the content of our page. Another one that you'll see people use sometimes is section or article, things like that. So maybe to kind of show you how we could use those, if I press enter and move main down a little bit, I can use my angle bracket and I will put in a section in here. And I'll enter that down. And then in this section, I'm going to put in an article. And you'll notice it automatically indents our information in here. It works the same even if everything's aligned on the far left hand side. It's just the indenting kind of helps to find your code a little bit easier. So don't freak out too much if you're indenting or if your spacing gets off a little bit. Spacing matters very little in our HTML code on here. Okay, so we have an article, and in our article we are going to put some text in here. Up here we used an H1, and we're going to put a heading in each of our articles. So in here we'll use a H, but instead of H1 we're going to use H2. And H2 is just a little bit smaller than an H1. We'll type in Army for this one. Actually, we'll go Air Force. We'll go alphabetically. So we'll go Air Force. And then underneath Air Force, I think it would work good if we have an image in there. So we'll put our angle brackets, and we're going to type in IMG, and then we're going to go SRC equals quotation marks, and then we're going to type in images slash, and it kind of gives us our little previews here when we start doing this. So I do have that Air Force file saved already, so I'm just going to click on it right there. I couldn't remember what I named the file, so if you forget, you can go back to your little folder here and see what it's called. airforcefootball.jpg, and we see here it puts that picture in there for us automatically. Pretty sweet. If we press enter after that, we can put in another tag. This one is going to be a letter P, and P stands for paragraph. We'll just type something in here. The quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog. And I'm going to copy that and just paste this multiple times so that I have some text to kind of work with in here so you can see this. This brings up a good point. Even though I started these all on a new line, you'll see here in HTML it continues to go to the side until it runs out of room, and then it wraps down. And that's fine because we can style that differently later. The last thing we'll put in this article is going to be an angle bracket and an HR, and then we'll close the bracket. And that is your horizontal rule or your line that kind of separates out this section. So that section looks pretty good. And we're going to copy this article. And the cool thing about web page is they're supposed to be consistent. You're supposed to follow a pattern. So then we can just Control V, and we can paste this down here, and we'll go down. And we'll Control V one more time. Alright, so here are 3 sections, but in here we'll change our text for the second one, and we'll switch this from Air Force to Army. And in here, I'm assuming that if I called this one Air Force Football.jpg, I do, and when I start typing it in, it starts showing me the picture right there. It's a beautiful thing. Alright, so I'll click Control S to save. And here's that image. Awesome. And then for the third one, we can go down here and we can type in Navy, and then we'll change this to Navy. Now if you're using your own images, again, you called yours something else, but they should be in the images folder, so make sure you have those things there. That's kind of important for later. And here are our 3 articles. That now concludes our section for this. Okay, next thing that we have is underneath. Actually, we could even put it in the same area. Let's do that. We'll put this underneath the section. We'll put it underneath. I'm having a hard time making a commitment. Okay, so down here we'll put one that's going to say footer. And in the footer, we're going to put a paragraph. Didn't close it for me automatically. The heck? And then in here, I'm going to type in page created by, and we'll just put our names in there. And then we're going to use and copy semicolon, which is an entity code. And then we'll just put in the year that this page was created. And copy semicolon is an entity code for the copyright sign. And here is our basic page that we've created. So this is kind of part one. This is the HTML part of it. We'll add one more thing to this, and this is actually going to be, we'll put it like underneath the body, but before the header. We're going to use a tag, which is called div in this case. And then I'm going to remove the second one on here. And we're going to give this div a class. A div is just a generic name for a container that could be anything. And oftentimes in a web page, you might have more than one div. On this particular one, we only have one. But a lot of times you'll have multiple. So in here, I'm going to give this div a class so that if I add another div later, I can distinguish between the different divs. So I'll go class equals quotation marks, and we will call this page box, all lowercase, all one word. And since we opened up the div, we need to close the div, and we're going to put this div all the way down here underneath the footer. And there we are. And if I did this correctly and I have div selected and I scroll up, then we'll see it also has it highlighted up here. And there's our code for this. Okay, let's go to our folder and we'll open up our index.html to see what this web page looks like. Like I said, it does not look very fantastic right now. So let's do something to make this page stand out a little bit more and look a little bit more like a web page. To do that, we need to create what is called a CSS document. And so all of this is HTML. This is our regular HTML code. But then CSS is like the designing language of it. And to create a CSS document is in this upper right hand section over here, there's this thing that says CSS Designer. We're going to click right there. And then we have where it says add a new CSS source. Okay, so I'm going to click on here, add new CSS source. And I want to create a new CSS file. So we're going to click on that. And in here, I like to click Browse to do this. And then I just make sure I'm in the right folder. In here, it says CIS series. It is. So then I'm going to call this styles.css. I always call my CSS files styles.css. And then I will click Save. And on here, I want to make sure that it says link because I'm creating a new one and I want to link it to this document, and I will click OK. All right. Now we have this new area up here on the top, like where it says styles.css. There might be a little star, there might not on yours, it kind of depends. And if I click on that, we see this is our styles code, and our source code is our HTML code. And it also added this link here that says link href styles.css. That means that this document is tied to this document as long as they're saved in the same folder they are. All right, and then this page is going to be where we create our rules for how all of this stuff is going to look. Okay, so to begin with, we'll go here, and when I do my CSS, I like to think of what the entire biggest area is first, and then I go from top to bottom. So when I look on here on my code, the body, that's the entire web page. So that's where I'm going to start with my styles.css. We used a body tag on our source code, and it starts up here and it ends down here at the very bottom. And so because that is a tag that says body, that's something I can use in my styles.css. So I'm going to type in body, and then I'm going to use my fancy brackets, and in here I'm going to type in background hyphen color and then a colon, and we can use any color we want. I generally will use a hex value because those just are friendlier to work with on the web. So I'm going to put a pound sign in here, and then I'm going to type in 00003F. And the cool thing about this on here is when that shows up, and you can even kind of use your color picker in there to work on that. That's pretty sweet. Then I'm going to put in a semicolon, and that is my first line of code on here, changing the background color. Now unfortunately when we did that, we can't see our text. It makes it too hard to see in there. But if we look on here, we have a div class of a page box which wraps all of our information, including all of this text. So what we'll do here is we're going to call pagebox. Now we could type in div like we did for body because it is a div tag, but if you remember before, I said we might be using different divs, and if we add a div later, we might not necessarily want it to behave the exact same way as this div. So since we gave it a class, we can type in here dot pagebox, and that's how you bring attention to a class, is with the dot first and then type it. And then we use our fancy brackets, and here I'm going to go background hyphen color, and we can go pound sign FFF FFF semicolon. So we'll just use white for that. Another thing that I kind of want to do is make it smaller than the body. So if I go down here, I can add another one still in the fancy brackets here, and after each of these we put a semicolon, and that tells you that rule is done, and then we make a new one. So another style we can do is width of 70%, and we'll go semicolon, and that looks pretty good, but I think it would be better if the margins were the same on both sides. So I can go margin auto. How many styles are there that you can use for the web? I don't know. I have no idea. There's a ton of them. But you can, don't feel like you have to memorize all of this stuff. It's always a Google search away. Anytime you get stuck building anything on a web page, like I always tell all my students, even if I'm not around, you know, it's always a Google search away. That you can find the answer there, and you would not be the first person in the history of the world who's had to Google, like, how do you change the margin size in CSS? You know, everybody's done that. I do it all the time. So that looks pretty good. This is centered pretty nice in there, and it goes all the way to the bottom. Now that I have that done, I can look here and start going from top to bottom. So maybe here for the header, or this H1, I might go in here and press enter a few times and type in H1 and my angle brackets. And again, I got H1 because right here in my header, H1 says CIC series. So maybe I want to change that up a little bit. Maybe I want to change the typeface or the font. So I can type in font hyphen family, and then I can type in something like Arial, and then I could put a comma, and I could type in sans hyphen serif. Sometimes it's not a bad idea to have multiple things typed in with a comma for fonts, because if the first font isn't installed on someone else's computer, then it won't show that particular font. So if I go Arial, but then I say, but if they don't have Arial, whatever their default sans serif is, I could use that. Or I could even say Helvetica, comma, Arial, comma, sans serif. That would be another option for that. So that type in there, change that. It looks pretty good. Maybe I want it to be bold. You know, maybe I want it to be a little like thicker text. So what I could do here is I could go font hyphen weight, and I can type in bold. And sometimes if that doesn't show up on there, the other thing we can do is we can go in here and we can select these different weights. So let's see like what 600 is. And it might just be one of those that's not going to be showing up properly on here. And we'll see here on our page, if we refresh this, it's on here. So depending on the font, maybe it's not going to show up the way that you want it to. There we go. Now it's showing up. So try different values until you see it the way that you want. But there we have the text a little wider, and that looks pretty good. Maybe I also want to change the color too and make it a little bit more patriotic here. So we can go color. So if background color changes the background color, color changes the color of the objects in it. And I'll go # 8B0000. I have kind of this deep red in here, and that looks pretty nice. Hex values, again, these are nothing that I have. Like I have black and white memorized. I know that white is all F's and black is all zeros. But again, those are only a hex value away, or a hex value away. They're all a Google search away where you can find those. But you can find those on a number of pages too. Okay, so H1 looks good. For the nav, I'm going to go here and I'll type in nav, and maybe this one I want it to be that same dark blue that we used up here. So I might select my background color that I used for the body and then come down here and paste it in the nav. And then I might try this and say I think that's good for that, but then underneath nav, no, actually I think this would work. This would work. So we could put it in here. We'll go color # FFF to have that stand out a little bit better in there. And then maybe we'll make it just a little bit taller. So we could say padding. Let's see what 5px does. That's a little bit better for us, so it gives us a little more space around those objects in there. So again, we would really do a much better job with our nav menu once we learn more about this stuff later. So that kind of keep that in mind. Another thing we can do is with these images, if we want all the images to behave the same way, we can sure do that. So we could go in here and we could type in img, put in our brackets, and maybe we just want these all to be 100% of the width of the page box. So we could say width 100% semicolon. And now when I scroll through here, That looks a whole lot better than what it did before. I might even change my H1. I might change one more thing on here. I might go font-size and go like, let's see what 48px looks like. And let's try 72px. I like that a little bit better. And then if we want the H2s to kind of match that a little bit, we can go in here and we could type in H2, and we can go font-family is going to be Arial, sans serif, and then I can go color is going to be $8B0000 semicolon. Now when I look at that, I think that looks good. I could make it bold, but I do think that looks effective, not being as bold as the H1 up there. And here we have it. So again, this is kind of a lot I was throwing at you, especially if this is your first time doing this, but hopefully if you come away from this, you can see that, you know, we just added some tags in our HTML, like header. This is going to be something we'll be using each week, so it'll be something you become familiar with. Our H1 tag is our very big heading. And then we have our different sections we used, articles. H2 is a smaller text than the H1, but still prominent. We have a paragraph text. We learned how to put images in there. And we're going to learn so much more about all of this. I just kind of wanted to show you what this looks like in terms of the code. And we won't be using just code a whole lot really ever again in this class. There will be times we use code, but I think it's important to at least have appreciation or an understanding of what's running on underneath the hood when we're using all these other features with this. So take some time, browse through that, kind of make sure that code, that you kind of have an understanding of what's going on. Go through and change any of those. You can change out the pictures or change the text or any of that. In your styles, you can change anything else in here. You can play around with those. Like maybe down here for the footer, that's something I could show you too real fast. We have the footer. We can use text -align center. So if you want to center your text, that's a possibility with that also. Or don't feel too scared to go online and see what kind of styles there are that you can play around with on this. Starting next time in class, we're going to be learning how to use the features of Dreamweaver to add all of this stuff in without us having to worry so much about the code. When you're done, make sure you go File, Save All. Make sure that styles and your source code are both saved. And then give your page another test when you look through there. And you know, this is already pretty impressive for it being the first thing we're making. So I appreciate you watching. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments or get a hold of me. And I hope you all have a great day.